Hi there, Richard Boppolz with Law Plus Plus again. Today we're going to talk about what happens if your articles gets rejected by the Secretary of State. Now this is going to be applicable for your nonprofit articles, your LLC articles, or your corporation articles. Some things aren't required in each of those, but we're covering the broad basics right now. So if your articles get rejected, what you're going to do is you're going to get an email from the clerk at the Secretary of State's office. And the first thing you want to do is not panic. So getting a rejection email from the Secretary of State does not mean you just lost your money. It means that you have to correct the issue and get back to them. Depending upon what that means, that could just mean that you have to refile your articles, or that could mean you have to make some changes with your articles themselves. For example, if you're starting a law firm and you just submit LLC articles of organization, you're going to get rejected because one, you have to file as a professional limited liability company, and two, you also have to get prior approval from the North Carolina State Bar before you can open up that LLC. So the Secretary of State in that case is probably going to refund your money, but before that they're going to ask, is this a law firm? Because the way they caught it was they saw law or legal or attorneys or some reserved word like that in the title, and that raised a red flag, so they're going to email you and be like, hey, is this a law firm? If you say yes, they're going to be like, okay, this isn't the correct procedure. You have to go about the correct procedure and refile. For most other situations, like if your name was taken, then you are going to get the opportunity to change the name and just resubmit the articles to that email address, and they're going to keep the filing fee and just process it once you respond. So the most common reason that articles get rejected that I see is there's missing information. So you're required to have things like your name, registered agent name and address, signature, and the organizer or incorporator information. In nonprofits, you're also going to need to have an address, and you're going to have to list a few nonprofit specific things, like whether or not your nonprofit has members. And then if you are ultimately going for 501c3 recognition, you also need to have a couple of provisions like charitable purpose. You need to have a provision that says that no amount of the proceeds are going to go to owners, and then what happens if the nonprofit dissolves. Where does the money go? The money and assets go, because it has to either go to the government or to another 501c3 charity under the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code. So those are easy to fix. The Secretary of State will be like, hey, you're missing information. Please supplement, change your articles, and resubmit that information. So that's easy. The second most common one is the signature doesn't match. And this one doesn't necessarily seem intuitive when you get the information, because you will list who the incorporator or the organizer is earlier in the articles, and then you're going to sign it. So those signature, the name has to match on those. And why this is the second most common is because sometimes people put the company name, either the company they're starting or the company that the person works at who is filing the articles. And so that will be a mismatch, and that'll get sent back to you. So for example, if I'm the incorporator of a corporation, I'm going to put that incorporator is Richard Boppolz, list my address, and then down below in the signature block, I'm going to put Richard Boppolz and sign it and date it. What I won't do is put Richard Boppolz up in the incorporator and then sign it with Law Plus Plus and then signed by Richard Boppolz. So that's the mismatch I'm talking about. That'll get rejected. The Secretary of State's going to send it back to you, and you're just going to have to delete what's not supposed to be in there, resubmit with the signature, and they'll approve it. The next most common one is reserved words. So there are a lot of reserved words in North Carolina, and just knowing what these are is a important thing. But the Secretary of State will let you know if you're using any of those. The earlier example of the law firm, if you use law, attorney, legal inside your name, those are reserved words for law firms. And if you use any of them, it'll raise a red flag. They'll get back to you and say you can't use these unless you're a law firm. Other ones are like bank or architect or any profession that has a licensing board. You have to go through the licensing board, so those will raise red flags. You also obviously can't use curse words in any language. Those will get rejected and sent back to you. With some of the reserved words, you can actually appeal. So I've known people who want to use like trust. Trust is a reserved word, but if you want to use it to say, we're the trusted company, then you can go through an appeals process with the Secretary of State's office and potentially get that approved. You just have to prove that you're not a trust company and that you're not using it to mislead people. And then at the end of the day, it's a discretionary approval through the Secretary of State's office, so you may or may not get approved. All right, and then the last most common reason I see is the name has been taken. So this is avoidable if you just do a name search ahead of time, but you have to remember that certain words are excluded. So words like the and are excluded from the names. You can't be the law plus plus because law plus plus is already taken. Those would be seen as the exact same thing under North Carolina law and through the software. So if you just did a name search ahead of time, you'll be able to eliminate that. The only time you wouldn't be able to is if two people filed between your name search and when you actually filed, and then that creates kind of a situation of who got onto someone's desk first, so which clerk received the articles first. What I always do when I get a rejection I don't understand is I just ask broad follow-up question of the clerk. They're very helpful, they're very nice. They can't provide legal advice, but they can respond to your inquiries if it's a process question or a clarification question. They're happy to do that, especially if you're nice to them. And sometimes that resolves it. So I've had cases where I've had articles rejected and I legitimately thought that everything was correct, and I respond with just very broad questions asking them to explain why the rejection, and they might move it up the flagpole, or they might review it again and come back to you with an acceptance, and that's great. Otherwise, you get more clarifying information as to why yours was rejected, and you get the chance to refile, and that's great too. All it does is delay a little bit. And the good news is, once you're onto a clerk's desk, you get to email directly with them any updates to the articles that you need to make, and they'll get back to you really quickly. So, being YouTube, this is the point where I say like, subscribe, click the bell, all the stuff. I'm Richard Bobbolts. This is Law Plus Plus. Thank you for watching.